Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games and Battle Report number 3 between the Corvus Cabal and the Legions of Nagash. The marching Legions of Nagash have stumbled across the Corvus Cabal's hunting ground, and only one thing can happen: it's time for battle. The Shadowpiercer and the Necromancer muster their warband and divide them into the shield, hammer and the dagger. The Corvus Cabal shield is the Shadowpiercer with 2 Spire Stalkers. The hammer's made up of the Shrike Talon with 2 Cabalists. And the dagger is made up of 2 Cabalists with spear and 1 Cabalist. And for the legions, the Necromancer's heading up the shield, along with 3 skeleton warriors with ancient spear, and also the Seneschal. The hammer's made up of 2 Graveguard with white blade and crypt shield, and 2 Graveguard with great white blade. And for the dagger, the skeleton champion is leading 2 skeleton warriors with ancient blade, and a skeleton warrior with ancient spear. Our leaders roll off, and the result goes to the legions, and the Necromancer takes priority. The battlefield terrain is number 5 from the Catacombs book. Our deployment card is Unseen Blade. The victory card is Drawn and Quartered. And finally, the twist card is No Holding Back. With priority under his cloak, the Necromancer chooses the blue deployment zones for his troops. With that deployment card, we'll see the hammer and the dagger both coming in round 2. The battlefield's set up to match the card, and we just made one small alteration. We added some deadly terrain at the bottom of the battlefield. Let's take a look at the victory card in detail, and this is Drawn and Quartered. To know victory, we must seize this entire region. Starting with the player who won the priority roll, players alternate placing objectives until they have placed 2 objectives each. Each objective can be placed anywhere on the battlefield, more than 3 inches horizontally from the centre of the battlefield and more than 4 inches from the battlefield edge, and any other objectives. At the end of each battle round, each player scores 1 victory point for each objective they control. The battle ends after 3 rounds. When the battle ends, the player with the most victory points wins the battle. Starting with the Necromancer, who won priority, he's going to place the first objective and strategically places it, knowing where his dagger and hammer are going to come on in round 2, and the Corvus Cabal mirror that. The third objective's placed by the Necromancer, and finally the Shadowpiercer places the final objective. Now it's time to resolve the twist. No holding back. The threat of violence hangs heavy in the air as rival warbands bellow challenges and foul oaths at those who oppose them. Add 2 to the value of abilities to a maximum of 6 used by fighters in the first battle round. With the battlefield set up and the twist and victory cards resolved, it's time to set up the battle groups in order. And first of all, we're setting up the hammer, and then we're going to set up the shield. And the Necromancer's going to go first, and he's placing himself with his supporting troops conveniently between 2 of the objectives there. A good position early on there, and now it's the turn of the Shadowpiercer with her 2 Spire Stalkers, and she's setting up her shield. That'll be within 3 inches of the marker, and then with the shield set up, it's time for the daggers to take their place, and they're going to wait on the edge of the battlefield until round 2. With the Legions of Nagash and Corvus Cabal in place, it's time for the battle to begin, and it's now round 1. The legions roll first in the hero phase, and they end up with a double and 4 singles. The Corvus Cabal roll, they also get a double and 4 singles. So now we're going to have to roll to see who's going to get the initiative, and the initiative goes to the legions, who use their wild dice in the next round. They reserve that, but the Corvus Cabal take their 6 and make that a double. With our twist card in play, the value of the abilities is going to go up in 2, and that's going to take the Corvus Cabal to 2 6s, and the legions are going to go with 1 double 6. With the initiative in hand, the legions go first, and the Necromancer summons his skeleton warrior to move, and he's going to take a defensive position there, And there's going to be a lot of movement in this first round as the players decide where their fighters are going to move to. And now it moves over to the Shadow Piercer, and it looks like the Spire Stalker's going to be activated first. And he's just measuring up there to see if he's in range, and he certainly is. And with a double, it's time for a Raven Dart, and he rolls. He needed a 3, he got a 2. That dart flies past and misses, and now he chooses to take a move action, and he moves across to the terrain there. Measured up, he's going to climb up the terrain and then end his turn on the top. The next Skeleton Warrior activates, and he's using a move action to get around and sneak behind that terrain and put himself in a position to move around with his eye on that next objective. And now it's the turn of the next Spire Stalker, and again measuring up to see in range, and there's another Raven Dart. He shoots, and it's another 2. It's a miss. That dart flies by. They're not hitting their target today, and now the Spire Stalker's looking to get position up there on the high ground and finishes his second move action on the steps, and he's going to end his activation there for this turn. Now it's the turn of the Seneschal, and he's just going to move there up to that terrain, and he's going to force any oncoming fighters to have to move around it. They won't be able to climb over that now, and he ends his activation. Now it's the turn of the Shadow Piercer. She's looking for some high ground as well. The Corvus Cabal are really making the most of this high terrain, and she ends her activation on the top of the terrain. With the extra 2 fighters in the shield, the Legions of Nagash are really taking advantage of this and move their Skeleton Warrior just to cut off that terrain there. So they're going to force any fighters to come around. And now it's the turn of the Necromancer, and he's just checking the range there, eyeing up the Spire Stalker. And yep, he's got line of sight on part of the model, and he rolls, and it's our first critical roll, a critical hit, dealing 6 damage to the Spire Stalker, and he decides to attack again, and this time it's another 3. So early on, our Spire Stalker there takes 9 damage, and that ends the activation for the Necromancer and the end of round 1. So now let's have a quick roundup of the action that we saw in round 1. And before battle round 1 began, our Corvus Cabal was set up here within 3 inches of their deployment point, and the Legions of Nagash were here within 3 inches of theirs, and straight away they were in a great position to dominate 2, possibly 3 of the objectives, with the Corvus Cabal looking at the 4th objective around here. But as round 2 was going to be in play, the Legions were coming on here and here, with the Corvus Cabal coming on here and here. So the Corvus Cabal really wanted to place their objectives close together here and here, and also close enough within this one that was placed by the Legions so they could use their fewer numbers to try and dominate, and also try and get between these 2 objectives so that they could dominate 2 at the same time. And then this one here was always going to be tough with the 4 Legions coming on at battle round 2, and with only 3 of the Corvus Cabal in the shield starting off. They had a big job to do. But let's see what happened at the end of round 1. So in round 1, the initiative went to the Legions, and they quickly got within 3 inches of this objective here, and you can see that they've got 3 fighters already in range of this objective, and they've got 3 fighters in range of the second objective. So they're really dominating that area. They've also got their eye on the 3rd objective here, and that's really going to make things difficult for the Corvus Cabal in round 2. The Corvus Cabal did their best, moved up onto the high ground here, and they got within 3 inches of this objective, and one of the Spire Stalkers there got within 3 inches of this objective, but it wasn't enough to take any lead for the Corvus Cabal. And so we saw 2 objectives won by the Legions, with 1 tied and 1 to the Corvus Cabal. So in round 1, it's 2 to the Legions and 1 to the Corvus Cabal. Going into round 2, the Corvus Cabal really need to get some fighters on the battlefield, but with the priority going to the Legions, they move in their Skeleton Warriors within 3 inches of their deployment point, and they're heading straight for that objective, and with their vast numbers, they're going to look to quickly dominate that. The Corvus Cabal move their dagger on, and they're coming in again within 3 inches of their deployment zone, eyeing up another objective there. And then finally the next battle group are coming on, and this is a tough one. We've got some of the grave guards there close to an objective right away, and then finally our Shrike Talon with the 2 Cabalists. They're going to come round at the bottom of the battlefield. Our fighters are on, so it's the hero phase of round 2, and the Legions of Nagash roll a triple, a double, and a single, and then the Corvus Cabal roll a triple, a double, and a single. So again, they're matching each other in the hero phase, and they'll have to roll to see who gets initiative. And again, that initiative goes to the Legions, and they decide to make a quad, and the Corvus decide to turn a single into a double. With the initiative tied, it's time for a roll-off, and the initiative in round 2 goes to the Corvus Cabal. The Shadow Piercer instructs the Spire Stalker, who took those injuries, to activate first, and he jumps down, and he's less than 3 inches, so no falling damage, and he lands just behind and in range of the Seneschal. Second action, he attacks, and he gets some luck there, and deals some damage to the Seneschal, giving him 8 damage, and that ends the activation for the Spire Stalker. Now it's the turn of the Grave Guard, who's going to make up some ground, and he makes 2 move actions, then uses a double, and that's going to give him an extra 2 to his move, and that ends his activation for this turn. The Shrike Talon activates next, and does some cool manoeuvring, climbing up onto the tower, positioning himself for an attack, and he perches on the edge, then uses a triple, and this is going to give him a bonus move and a bonus attack action, because he's jumping down from 3 inches vertically, and then he's going to have to roll for falling damage first though, and he passes, no injury there, and now he's in a great position to make another attack on that Seneschal. They're looking to take him out, and he rolls, and with 5 attacks, this is a great attack, and more than enough to take out the Seneschal, and he's going to be removed from the battlefield. He's done for the day, and he didn't even get to make any attacks. So a great round there for the Shrike Talon, and he ends his activation. That shook the Necromancer. He's not happy, so he's going to move himself away from the powerful Shrike Talon and Spire Stalker, puts himself strategically between his fighters, and then eyes up the Spire Stalker that he's already damaged, and attacks with his ranged weapon, and it's another critical hit, and that's going to be enough to take out the Spire Stalker. That's a huge setback for the Corvus Cabal, who can't afford to lose fighters this early on. But our Necromancer's not finished yet. He's using that big quad, and this is going to give all the fighters within 6 inches of him, to the value of the ability, an extra movement in their next turn. And with a value of 5, he's got 5 fighters who can all benefit from that. And he's going to end his activation, and what a great round for the Necromancer. Now it's the Cabalist with Spear, who moves in to protect the objective, and is well within range of that Skeleton Warrior with shield, and he's going to make an attack, and he rolls, and this is great. He gets a critical hit, and he's going to deal 4 damage to that Skeleton Warrior. But he's not finished. He's going to use that Raven Dart with a double. He rolls, it's another 2. These darts aren't hitting today, and that ends the activation for the Cabalist. That quad was a great move by the Necromancer, who's now allowing the next Graveguard that extra movement, and they're really going to take and dominate these objectives now. And that ends the activation there. And now the Corvus Cabal, another Cabalist with Spears, going to move in, protecting the objective. And again, within range of that Skeleton Warrior, they've got to take this one out. And they're going to roll. And again, we get a critical hit. And that's enough to do 4 damage. And that's going to take that fighter out of the game. And it's good night for the Skeleton Warrior. And that's a good move for the Corvus Cabal, who've now dominated that objective. And now it's the Graveguard, who's going to again take advantage of that extra move, and they're really setting up a wall there and making a great defensive position, protecting the objective and protecting their Necromancer. And so lots of movement here now as the Corvus Cabal come around, protecting that objective and really dominating that corner of the battlefield, ending their activation. The turn of the 4th Graveguard, who moves up and is looking to block that doorway so none of the enemy fighters can come through it, protect the Necromancer, and also position himself between 2 objectives. And then finally, another Cabalist is going to make a little sneaky move onto the top of the tower, really getting some advantage from the height and preparing themselves for the next round, ending their activation. And now it's the Legions, and again that quad ability paying off as the Skeleton Warrior with Spear moves in and gets in contact with the Corvus Cabal, ends their activation. And now it's our Cabalist with Familiar, who's measuring up to see if she can reach the top of this building and to get a nice position perched above the battlefield and ready to come down on those objectives. And she's just measuring up to see if she's in range of that Skeleton Warrior, and she is. And with their final ability, she's using a double, and this dart hits. And finally, we're going to get some damage from the dart, but it's just one wound, and that ends her activation. This sneaky skeleton was forgotten about, and he seems to have made a little path for himself now, and he's just measuring up there. Again, he was one of the 5 that was in range for the quad ability from the Necromancer, so he's able to position himself and end his activation in a great place for round 3. Our second Spire Stalker's just measuring up to see if he's got the movement range there to get to that objective and get some payback for his fallen brother earlier on, and he does, and he's just taking a test for falling damage, and he takes 1 damage, doesn't quite make it, but he does end up in a good position behind the Necromancer, ends his activation, and waits to pounce in round 3. The Skeleton Champion moves up to take the objective, and these 4 are going to hold it really easily, and he ends his activation. And then this is the final move now for the Corvus Cabal, and the Shadow Piercer jumps down, positioning herself in the middle of the battlefield, doesn't take any falling damage, and ends her activation in a decent position there. And now it's the time for the remaining 3 fighters for the Legions of Nagash, and they're just going to move, making sure they get the objective. One's going to come around in case anyone decides to double back, and our final skeleton seals the deal there on the objective, and that ends battle round 2. So let's have a quick recap and see what happened there and who's won the objectives for this round. And now at the end of round 2, the Legions of Nagash have done a great job securing these objectives, and this one here is being completely dominated, and there's 3 Skeleton Warriors all within 3 inches, and the 4th one has just come here just to block any retreat, but there's not a lot the Corvus can do about that. That's pretty much written off now, and they've given up on that objective and left it to the Skeleton Warriors to hold on to, and they know those Skeleton Warriors can't get back here in time. They haven't got enough range to move in and do anything with the other 3 objectives. The Legions are holding on to this second objective here, and they're looking to move their 3 Graveguard, who've put up a nice defensive wall along there, and they've got an option of moving back. They're also taking care of this 3rd objective. There's a sneaky Graveguard here who can also move back to help the Necromancer, or stay there securing that one and blocking the door. One of the Skeleton Warriors with Spear is here, putting a little bit of pressure on the Corvus Cabal, along with this other Skeleton Warrior with Spear, who's waiting for the Corvus Cabal to make a move. And if they move away from that objective, there's going to be 2 Skeleton Warriors there that can tie it, and potentially one of the Graveguards can also come in, and they could steal that objective too. So the Corvus Cabal have got a lot of work to do in round 3, but let's see what they've done in round 2 and what they're going to plan to do moving forward. So the Corvus Cabal, the Spire Stalker, made a great move over here to this objective, and he moved straight in, putting pressure on the Necromancer, and if he can take him out, because he's pretty tough, the Spire Stalker, then they could potentially steal away that objective and make these Graveguards have to move back towards it, and then that'll take the pressure off this one here, allowing the Strike Talon to really dominate. The Cabalist is positioned nicely on top of this building, getting in range of this objective, but also can make a move on this one if need be, and she's well out of the way there. She's not going to get any damage done to her, so she's going to be sitting pretty there, just waiting to see what the Legions do. Our Shadow Piercer has placed herself in a nice position in the middle of the battlefield, and she can either attack the Graveguard here and reduce those numbers, but she'll certainly want to be moving in to this position in between the 2 objectives here and here, and she can get herself there, then she's going to be well within 3 inches of each, and if she can take out 1 or 2 of those skeletons, then that's going to be a great move there, and that's really going to help her team up with the Spire Stalker here and also the Cabalist with Familiar here, and they could really look at stealing that objective. Then we've got 3 Cabalists here, 2 with a spear and 1 regular Cabalist, and they're dominating this objective. They've been holding this since the beginning of the round, and they've got their eye on this skeleton here. They want to be pushing that one away, but he's really holding them back from moving through. So a key for them going into round 3 is to take out this skeleton warrior right here. And if they can remove him, that's going to free them up to do some movement, get in on this objective, hold this one, and then they're going to be able to maybe take 2 other objectives here. So they've got a lot to play for, and they've also got another Cabalist up on the tower who can jump down, protect here, potentially get in between the 2 objectives within 3 inches here and here. And yeah, they've got some opportunities, but they really do have to take out this skeleton, and he's going to be key to a lot of it, as is one of these grave guards, depending on where they move. So there's a lot to play for in round 3, so let's see how it goes down. But after round 2, the Legions of Nagash have got 1 objective here, a drawn objective there, they're winning this one, and the Corvus Cabal are winning this one. So again, it's 2-1 to the Legions of Nagash after round 2, and that takes the total to 4 points to 2 going into round 3. Now we're into the final round, round 3, and it's the hero phase, and the Legions roll first, and they end up with a double 6, a double 4, and 2 singles, and the Corvus Cabal roll, and they end up with 4 4s and 2 singles. A great roll there, and they're really going to need this quad in this final round. They both rolled for initiative, and the initiative goes to the Corvus Cabal, who decide to make their single 5 a double 5, and the Legions make their double 6 a triple 6. Sensing danger, the Necromancer decides to go straight in with the triple ability, which is Summon Undead, and a very good move here to bring back the powerful Seneschal, and this is going to be a great move. And he adds 6 wounds there in line with the instructions for the ability, and he's just measuring up to place him within 3 inches of himself, and he puts him between 2 objectives there. So that's a really great strategic move. He's got to be wholly within that 3 inches, so we're just making sure, and there we go, he's bang on in a great position. And now it's time for the Necromancer to attack, and he turns on the Spire Stalker, rolls, that's a miss, rolls again, and he just gets 1 hit there, just dealing 1 point of damage. So the Spire Stalker got away with it there, and now it's the turn of the Corvus Cabal. The Shrike Talon is just over an inch away and out of range of the Grave Guard, so he has to use 1 action to move in, and now he's going to use his second action to attack, and with a huge 5 attacks, this is a great roll, and he deals some serious damage here. 8 damage, not enough to take him out, but he's not finished yet. He uses that quad, and he's going to make a little sneaky move just around, and then he's going to use an attack, and so he can roll 5 dice again, and this is going to take this player out for sure, and it's game over for the fighter, and that's one of the Grave Guard out of the battle now, and this is going to free up some space and also give them a chance of getting that objective. But now the Legions of Nagash are reacting, and rather than going on the offensive, they're pulling back, and this Grave Guard's been very sneaky and put himself between 2 objectives and ended his activation. Now the Cabalist with Spear has to take out this skeleton if they stand any chance of getting these objectives, and so he's going to make 1 attack, and it does some damage, but let's see how many. Not enough, so he goes again, and with a 5, that's another hit, but this isn't enough damage to take this one out, and so that fighter now is on 5, and that ends the activation for the Cabalist with Spear. The Skeleton Warrior with Spear is going to retaliate, and he's going to make an attack in return, and that's 1 hit, and he goes again, and that's going to be another 2 hits, but only dealing 3 damage to the Cabalist, and that ends his activation. They have to take this Skeleton Warrior out, so the second Cabalist with Spear is in range and makes an attack with 4 dice, and it's not a great roll, just 1 hit, goes again, still not good enough, and that's just going to put 2 points of damage, and that Skeleton Warrior is still in the battle, and that ends the activation for the Cabalist with Spear. Now the Grave Guard, this one comes away from the doorway, in range of 2 objectives, and ends his activation, and is straight back to the Corvus Cabal and the Shadow Piercer, and she has to take out this skeleton. It's key to getting that objective, and so she's going to use the double for the darts and rolls, and it's a 1, a terrible roll. These darts have done nothing all battle, and that's a miss, but she's still got 2 actions and decides to move, gets within range of the objective, and she's going to make an attack on the Seneschal and clear up some room there, so there's a chance they might be able to steal some of these objectives. And so she rolls 4 attack dice, gets a critical hit, but the others are too low, and that's going to not deal enough damage, only 13 in total, ending her activation, and the Seneschal remains in the game. This Seneschal's been known to hold a grudge and immediately turns on the Shadow Piercer and attacks, and he has to attack with both his actions, not dealing enough damage to take her out, but still a good 10 points of damage. That's going to end his activation as he knocks over his fellow Graveguard, but now it's back to the Corvus Cabal, and the Spire Stalker is going to take on the Necromancer. And he rolls, the first attack's not enough, he rolls again, still not good enough. We're going to deal some damage, 8 points of damage, but not enough to take out this fighter, and that ends his activation. Now it's the Legion's turn, and this Graveguard decides to just end his activation without doing anything, and so it's straight back to the Corvus Cabal, who move down in position within 2 of the objectives, and she's going to end her activation there. And now it's back to the Legions. This guy's just going to end his activation too, and then over here to the Cabalist, eyeing up the distances between the 2 different objectives, but still that sneaky skeleton warrior with ancient spear is holding things up. But the Cabalist has got time and moves around and is looking to get in range of both of those objective markers, and so ends the activation. Now it's that skeleton warrior who climbs over the deadly terrain. He's going to have to do a quick check, and he makes it with a 1, no problem, and he's going to put some pressure on them and ends his activation within range of the objective. Now our Cabalist, who's up perched on the tower, is going to jump down, get straight in there and see if he can get close enough and do some damage. And he takes a rolling test, he takes 3 wounds, and now for his next action he's going to move up and try and tie that objective and put some distance between him and those Graveguards. And that's going to end his activation with no abilities or actions left. And then that moves over now to the Legions of Nagash, who have got lots of fighters left, ending all their activations and ending round 3, and that's the end of the battle. So let's have a summary of what went on and see who's won. So after the 3rd and final round, the Legions of Nagash have easily secured 1 objective here. This is a drawn objective here. The Legions won this one, and the Corvus Cabal won this one. So that's 2 points to the Legions and 1 to the Corvus Cabal, taking their main points at the end of the game to 6-3, and that's a huge victory for the Legions of Nagash. The Corvus Cabal just couldn't get into the game. There's too many of the skeletons there, and they really struggled to take down the numbers. This skeleton warrior was so tough here, and our 2 Cabalists with spears just couldn't take him out, and he was key for them to be able to move in on this other objective. And he really did hold his ground, and even though he was taking attacks from both of those Cabalists with spears and an attack from the leader, the Shadow Piercer, he held on, blocked them, and really caused them some trouble. Our Strike Talon couldn't get in the game either, and his big 5 attacks weren't enough to deal enough damage to that line of Graveguard that we saw there, and so you couldn't reduce those numbers to dominate, and they just completely took over that objective for the whole game. Our Shadow Piercer got into a great position, but couldn't take out the Seneschal for the 2nd time, and he held his ground, putting himself in a position between 2 objectives, and that really did dominate for them. So this was a game of movement, not many attacks, and those attacks that did come in from the Corvus Cabal to the Legions, they really needed to take those fighters out, especially that skeleton, and they just couldn't do it, and that cost them the game, cost them the battle. And all the Legions had to do was keep manoeuvring, staying out of the fight, and positioning themselves in a way to prevent the Corvus Cabal getting access to the objectives. And they did a great job using their numbers to do that. But I think this one up here in the corner, dominating that objective, right from the beginning of Battle Round 2 was key for them, and then they could use the rest of their fighters that even still outnumbered the Corvus Cabal, and they took over these 3 objectives quite easily. And the victory goes to the Necromancer and the Legions of Nagash, and they did a great job throughout the battle, just being sneaky. That extra movement really helped them get in a great position, a defensive wall against the Corvus Cabal, and their numbers just overwhelmed them. They dominated one of the objectives, and the Corvus Cabal struggled with some terrible rolls and just couldn't catch up and couldn't take out enough of the Legions of Nagash fighters to hold any real objectives. There'll be no grisly trophies for the Shadow Piercer after this battle, and she'll go back to her nest with her beak hung in shame. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please add any feedback, and if I've got anything wrong or any rules wrong or made any mistakes, please add them in the comment section below. I really appreciate your feedback. It's awesome. Thank you. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.